Yo, what's up, Broncos country? How's it going tonight, guys? So, me and Muhammad wanted to jump on here and make this video today to go over the Broncos 2025 expectations, uh, what all the division rivals are going to do in free agency and the draft, including the Broncos, and maybe go over the NFL as a whole of what we think each team probably needs and what we think they're going to do next season. So, but to get into it, first of all, Muhammad, the main thing I wanted to start off with: what should Broncos country and yourself expect from the Broncos in 2025?
Well, I know Eddie, we are, are kind of like hopeful, and just we think the Broncos are going to be better, and that's the hope. I did hear some rumblings, like around the NFL, about the Broncos defense possibly taking a step back. That kind of worries me a little bit. I don't know where that's coming from, but at least with all the additions that I believe the Broncos would do, at least we'll win our first playoff game. That's what I see us going. Winning the division, depending on what we do in free agency and the draft. Like I said last week, the Chargers kind of scare me a little bit. They're gonna be challenging us pretty hard. But yeah, hopefully win the division, win that first playoffs game. Maybe we'll go deep, depending on what we do.
Yeah, last year, we were doing our lives, and talking about predictions, even whenever, because this was more towards, the start of the season, like, right around training camp, preseason, all that stuff. I was saying earlier that year, like June or, May of last year, I was saying the Broncos should win about 10 games. And this is after we drafted Bo Nix, of course. I was like, the Broncos should win 10 games this year. Because I was like, the previous year, they went 8-9 with Russell Wilson. With Sean Payton. Sean Payton gave us that additional 3 wins from the 2022 season. And I'm like, he got us 8 wins. He got us 3 more wins with the quarterback he didn't want. A quarterback that, really didn't fit his system. I'm like, now that Sean Payton got to handpick his guy, granted he was a rookie, but he handpicked this dude. I'm like, I think that's at least worth an additional 2 wins. And I was right. Now, as the season got closer, as we saw Bo Nix perform in preseason and training camp and all the practices, I got a little bit more cocky and was like, oh, they could probably win 11, 12 games. I'm sure you remember that, Mohammed. I said that towards the beginning of the season last year because just the way Bo Nix was looking in the system, I was like, oh, it's possible. At one point, I think I picked them to go 11 or 12 wins. But the Broncos did do, like, after everything, after even some Bronco fans told me I was crazy for picking the Broncos to even win 10 games. Like, they'll probably win about 8 or 9 games again, 8 games, to tie the previous year, or 9 games to finally have the first winning season. And of course, we know Vegas picked the Broncos to win like 5.5 last year, and they practically doubled that. Um, but people were calling me crazy. And then what happened? The Broncos won 10 games. My initial thing I said was the Broncos were going to win about 10 games, and I was right. Because Sean Payton had his guy, Sean Payton being there. This year, my expectations for the Broncos, of course, make the playoffs. Like you made them last year with, $53 million in dead cap. You had no weapons. You had no run game, no tight end. You had a bad safety. Your inside linebacker group wasn't that great. And even your defensive line, they were better than previous years, but they still weren't that great at stopping the run, in my opinion. But now this offseason, the Broncos have $42 million in cap space. They got all their draft picks back. And that was the other thing. They didn't have all their draft picks last year either. They got all their draft picks, $42 million in cap space. I believe like the way Sean Payton's construction of this roster, and I trust him. He got the quarterback of the future. He solidified that position. And he solidified the offensive line his first year here. He went out and got 2 big, free agency, signings and Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers to solidify our offensive line. He's going to build this roster perfectly fine. He's going to get his tight end 1. He's going to get his RB 1. I guarantee he's going to get another receiver for this room. He's going to, he's going to solve safety inside, and I think the defensive line more to protect for the run. So my predictions this year is the Broncos make the playoffs and win at least one playoff game, and honestly make a deep run to the playoffs. I'd say AFC Championship game this year. Because with the way teams are nowadays, it ain't like it was 10, 20 years ago where it takes maybe a year, two, maybe three to rebuild. Nowadays, you got teams, turn around in 1 year. Like, they have a bad year, they get their quarterback, they add pieces to the team, and boom, the next year they're making it into the divisional round of the playoffs. Maybe the championship. I mean, look at the Commanders last year. Got their, franchise rookie quarterback, made the NFC Championship game. So that's my thing. I think the Broncos, my prediction for them this year is AFC Championship game. Bo Nixon's second year, better and more weapons on this team, solidify that defense a little bit more, and I think this team can make a push in the AFC. And as games, I'll get your take here in a minute, Mohammed, but games this year, I think the Broncos should win 12 games this year. Like they won 10 last year. I think at least two more is not too much to ask. I said this last year. The previous year, we went 8-9 with a quarterback that Sean Payton didn't want. Gets his quarterback, he gets those 2 extra wins. Second year with Bo Nix and Sean Payton system, 2 more wins. It should be 12 wins this year. 12-5 is what the Broncos should go. What is your record prediction for the Broncos?
Yeah, I don't think what you're saying is crazy, Eddie. Because I mean, even look last year, there were some games that were pretty close that we should have won, like the Chiefs, for example. So we could have been easily 11. I know. So why am I bringing that, right? But like
Yes.
we could have been like 11 or 12 wins. So now you're talking about we have more money on the cap, and you're gonna bring some free agents, the draft, and you got Sean Payton, you got Bo Nix going into the second year. Yeah, I don't think that's crazy, Eddie. 12 wins, even more. That's why I just can't wait, Eddie, for the draft. Free agents just to see what improvements the Broncos gonna do. But yeah, that seems like a good record for the Broncos.
By the way, everybody, please like, comment, subscribe on this video. Also, hit the bell notification so you know when we go live. But also, Mohammed, I wanted to tell you this: you do realize free agency is 18 days away,
Yes.
and honestly, it's maybe a little bit earlier too, because as we know, I think like the tampering period opens like free agency opens like officially opens on March 12th, which is a Wednesday. But teams can start tampering and getting deals in place that Monday. I think it's the 10th of March. So you got about 16 days until you start seeing players saying, "Hey, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there," and you start seeing trades taking place in free agency. So you only got, like I said, you got 12 more, or what did I say? 18, 16 more days. I'm sorry. You got 16 more days until that opens. You're going to start seeing you're going to be starting to see some trades getting put in place, players signing with teams. So that's not too far. I mean, like I said, 16 days, that's a little over 2 weeks. And we're going to be there. So I'm excited, man. I can't wait. I can't believe free agency is already almost here. Before we know it, the draft's going to be here, and before we know it, the season's going to be here again. Like, I know it just ended, but it's going to be here before we know it again, guys. So, but anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk about, Mohammed, was I wanted to go over each team, preferably in the AFC West, and their needs in free agency, their needs in the draft, what we think they're going to do, and honestly, our predictions, if we can get to that, over next season for all these teams. But first, we'll start with the Broncos. We kind of already talked about it. We know what the Broncos' big needs are this offseason. Running back and tight end. To me, those are the two biggest needs for this team. There's no doubt. You need a tight end one to work the middle of the field where Bo Nix can throw like Russell Wilson can. And we know Sean Payton loves his tight ends. And you need a run game for this kid. Last year, I don't know how many, I counted, I think like 7 or 8 games. Bo Nix was the leading rusher. We need an RB1. That's main priority for. And honestly, a couple years ago, people were saying, "Oh, the running back's a dying, position." It was like running backs weren't getting paid, And then this past year, the resurgence, I guess you could say, or maybe not the resurgence, but of Saquon and Derrick Henry for the Ravens and for the Eagles. I guess you could say the resurgence of the running back position happened this year. Like the Chiefs were so worried in that Super Bowl about Saquon. Like they shut Saquon down. I think he only had like 50 yards rushing in that game in the Super Bowl. But the Chiefs were so hell bent. I mean, they stopped him. They were so hell bent on stopping Saquon that it opened up the passing game for Jalen Hurts.
That's what
And he
happens.
dominated the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. So I never really was on the train of, the running back room is a dying breed. Regardless if it's a rookie quarterback, a guy in his prime, or even a vet at the end of his career, you need a solid running game to take pressure off the quarterback. Like if a team, like look at the Chiefs, like they didn't hardly run at all in the Super Bowl because Andy Reid's like, I got Patrick Mahomes, the guy can throw the ball deep down. He can do it. Even Patrick Mahomes, without a run game, couldn't score any points in the first half. Maybe if he had a running game that maybe opened up the passing game, maybe it would have been a little bit of a closer game. And Andy Reid's play calling wasn't terrible. I think he ran like 5 times that entire game. He called 5 run plays. So, yeah, running back's a huge thing for the Broncos. You get that stud running back here and make life easier for Bo, the sky's the limit for this team. And then, but what are your biggest needs? I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say, but what are your biggest needs for this team?
Same thing, Eddie. I mean, running back, that's a big one. Tight end. From there, you could maybe talk about the defense a little bit. You could think about maybe the defense, defensive line, maybe an interior defensive lineman, somebody beefy, inside linebacker. I'm hoping we can, take care of inside linebacker and safety on free agency. But if not, we could definitely go on the draft for that need.
Well, this is my thing. I do agree that inside linebacker and safety are big for the Broncos this year, but this is my thing. And I mean, it's not really something that it's new news. Every football fan of any team that's like, I wouldn't say not a casual. If you're not a casual fan, you're actually a diehard football fan and you just like football. The outside of quarterback, okay, outside of that position, to me, the 2 biggest things for any team to have to win games is the trenches, offensive and defensive lines. If you don't have those solidified, I don't care if you got Saquon Barkley. I mean, look at the Giants. Didn't have a quarterback, didn't have an offensive line. Saquon, yeah, he was a shining beacon of that team, but they couldn't do jack. Same with like a top receiver. I mean, the Jets, the Raiders, they had Devontae Adams, arguably one of the best receivers. Couldn't do nothing. Yeah. They couldn't do nothing because the offensive and defensive lines weren't that great. But to me, after running back and tight end, solidify at least those 2 spots, give Bo Nix some more weapons to play with. Once that happens, you've already solidified the offensive line. It's time for Sean Payton. Like, if you have to cut, DJ Jones or get rid of some of these depth pieces, like John Franklin Myers, I think is good. Of course, Zach Allen, he's a beast. But you need to add more depth. You need to get a better defense. You need to get someone, like I've said before. I said this last week, Muhammad. You need to get someone that teams need to game plan for. That is a game wrecker on the defensive line. Someone that, is going to take up almost 2 offensive line every single play to let the other guys go in there and eat.
Like Chris Jones, maybe? Somebody like
Chris
that?
Jones, Aaron Donald, I'd say even Sweat from the Eagles, Jalen Carter from the Eagles. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be like Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. Like, it doesn't have to be that level, but someone that teams are like, hey, we have to know where he's at on the field at all times. That way other guys can eat. But defensive line, outside of running back and tight end, like, if you get that guy on the defensive line and the defensive line can get pressure, if they can get there in like 2-3 seconds, don't give the quarterback any time. Then to me, I'm not saying it's, not a need, but it's less of a need for an inside linebacker or safety if you can get that kind of pressure from the defensive line. If they can get back there and make the quarterback uncomfortable to where he can't read and he can't make his quick, throw, like inside linebacker, yeah, it still needs a safety, but I don't think it would be as big of a need. It's not dire. If you have that pass rush that can get home, and the quarterback ain't got time to do anything, you're good. An average inside linebacker and average safety should be okay in those positions. And honestly, that's what, I kind of want to say KC did. Like they had Chris Jones, they had Karlaftis, they had these good defensive guys. Even Philly, like Vaughn, like people are talking about him now because of what he did in the Super Bowl. But before the Super Bowl, no one was really talking about that inside linebacker Vaughn for the Eagles. Their safeties, no one was really talking about the Eagles safeties. Whenever that 4-man rush for the Eagles defensive line was getting home and making Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable, guess what? Those guys were able to feast. They were, to me, they're not like elite inside line. They're not like a Ray Lewis. They're not like a Bobby Wagner or, a Steve Atwater, or I'm trying to think of another safety out there that was an all-time, like a Justin Simmons. Like, these guys were average players. But because the defensive line was able to make Mahomes uncomfortable and get to him, guess what? They were able to make plays. They were average, and they were able to make plays because Patrick Mahomes was making mistakes because he was getting pressure. So, to me, the Broncos, running back, tight end, defensive line, and then after that, I would say probably a receiver, middle linebacker, safety. That's what I think the Broncos need to do this free agency period and draft period.
Just wanted to add something, Eddie.
What's up?
See, this point that you're making about the D tackle, defensive line position. In my mind, I know we're going to be talking about the draft next week, but in my mind, I'm thinking if the Broncos are sitting on the first round and Tyler Warren is gone, I think he'd probably be, Gente is gone, they might, since this is a really deep running back and tight end draft, they might say, you know what, we can get like a defensive tackle in the first round, wait until day 2 to get a running back and tight end. That's a possibility, I think. What say you?
It just depends, honestly. I would have to look because it all depends on what they do in free agency. Like I would agree with that to an extent, but I think Sean Payton at this point and Bronco fans in general are they're more apt to go running back or tight end round 1. I know I made that big speech about defensive line, and I do agree with that. But Sean Payton's offensive minded. He's going to want this team to score points. So I think he's going to go out there. And Bo Nix really doesn't have any weapons outside of Cortland Sutton. I mean, you got Vele, Marvin Mims, but you don't have nobody that can really stretch the middle of the field. You have no run game to speak of. Like, I think since Bo Nix was the leading rusher last year, because we had no run game, I think that at least the running game, triumphs the defensive tackle position. He's like, I got to protect my young rookie or my young quarterback. I got to get him some help, at least in the run game. So that way teams at least, have to respect our run game, and that'll open things up down the middle of the field for Bo Nix. So if I had to guess, say they get a receiver, they get a safety, they get an inside linebacker in free agency, they go into the draft. I think at that point, first round would probably, depending on who's on the board, like there's so many running backs. Like this draft class is running back and tight end deep. But I still think they're going to go running back, first round. Second round, it could be a toss-up between tight end and defensive lineman. Yeah. Just depending on who's on the board at that point. So, but that's my thoughts on it. But next team I want to get into is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit last week. That team, to me, like I've been watching podcasts, I've been watching videos on YouTube. Kansas City's in a world of freaking hurt right now. This was their one shot. I've been watching, even like mainstream media people I've been watching. They're like, yeah, the Chiefs are going to take a step back. They're probably going to take a step back for the next couple of years, get their cap under control, and, have to draft really well again and build this roster. So, with that said, and they got a lot of free agents. They got $11 million in cap space right now. And they've already given Travis Kelce a hard deadline. March 14th, which is like 2 weeks away. Or no, I'm sorry. Yeah, about 2 weeks away. March 14th. If Kelce hasn't made a decision on retiring by then, or whatever it is, the Chiefs are probably going to downright cut him.
You think so, Eddie?
Yeah, because the reason why is because he's got 14 coming up. Like if he's guaranteed 14, I think, or actually more, maybe 16 million come March 14th. Like he doesn't make a decision. The Chiefs have to make a decision by the day. Otherwise, he's going to be guaranteed all that money. So they got like And honestly, even if Travis Kelce comes back, I'm pretty sure he's got 2 years left on his deal, but neither one of them have guaranteed money on those 2 years.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if they don't make a decision, then at least next year's money does become fully guaranteed. They have to make a decision by then, by March 14th. If Kelce doesn't, then if Kelce doesn't come up with a decision by then, the Chiefs are going to have to decide. Like, hey, are we going to keep Kelce? Are we going to cut him? Whatever. So probably here in the next 2 weeks, we're going to hear whether if Kelce is going to retire or if he's going to stay. And maybe if he stays, maybe they can work out something to do over his next few years, maybe restructure his deal to get more cap space this year. But like Chris Jones, they're going to have to probably restructure. Patrick Mahomes are going to have to restructure because they're getting ready to lose their young offensive lineman, Thuney, or I forgot who, or no, Trey Smith, their offensive guard. I think he's like 26 years old. He's a free agent. They got to decide what to do with him. If they can't, then he's going to have to walk in free agency. Nick Bolton, their best linebacker, they got a decision to make on him. If he doesn't, he's going to walk. He's only 25. Even their best safety, Justin Reed, he's only 26, and he's a free agent. These guys are going to want the bag, especially at offensive line. If I was the Chiefs, I would restructure these guys and at least get Smith back in here. Because Thuney, I keep screwing up his name. Thuney, he's 33 years old. Their offensive tackles, they have none. They got a good center. They need to solidify at least 2 guys on the offensive line. So I would, restructure guys, keep Smith, the guard, and you'll still have Thuney, your other guard. You just got to solidify your tackle positions. So what are your thoughts about the Chiefs, Mohammed?
I mean, Eddie, they don't have any money. Like, seriously, like they have none. What are they gonna do? They're lucky if they're able to keep their own people. Yeah, that
they have to restructure.
Yeah, they have to restructure. They're gonna have to let some of their free agents walk. They're not gonna be able to pay everybody. I mean, it is what it is. I'm really happy that's happening to them. This was their year, Eddie. They wanted to win the Super Bowl because they knew after this year, it's going to be very difficult for them to go to the Super Bowl again because they're not going to be able to keep those players, and that's why I think they're going to take they're declining, yeah, no money. Kelce is not coming back. I don't see him coming back, Eddie. I think he's going to retire.
Honestly, right now, I don't know. Like, I'm listening to everybody. They say Travis Kelce can't go out this way. He can't go out the way he did in the Super Bowl. But at the same time, it's like, dude, what? In my mind, I'm thinking like, if I'm Kelce, I'm like, what more do I have to prove? I got 3 rings. I've literally broken so many records in the tight end room. I'm going to go down as one of the greatest tight ends in the world ever. Yeah. And why not retire? My gameplay has fallen off. And funny to that, like I was watching this guy the other day. He did a video on Mahomes and Kelce. And I'm going to say this, and I know some people are going to probably be like, what? But with Kelce, they'll be like, yeah, it's true. But with Mahomes, they'll be like, what are you talking about? Mahomes and Kelce are both washed. This is the videos I was watching over the last couple of days. Kelce, people can agree with. He's old. He's going to be 36 by the start of the next season. The guy looked like garbage. Like, he did not play up to his standards this entire season. He only had 3 touchdowns. His best season, I think, was like, what was it, like 1,200 yards or something, and like 12 touchdowns or something like that crazy. Travis Kelce, like, I think he should retire. People say he can't retire this way. I'm like, why not? Why? So he can come back next year and have a worse season than go out that way? Yeah. What happens next year if he has like no touchdowns and like 500 yards? So if I was Kelce, I would retire. I'm not saying that because I want him to retire. Even if he comes back, I'm not worried about Kelce anymore. He is washed. I'm not worried about him. He's not that much of a threat. He couldn't even beat man coverage this year. He couldn't even beat zone coverage. Like, he's not a threat to me anymore. So I don't care if he comes back. I think personally he should retire and just hang it up before he makes himself look worse. Kind of like Russell Wilson, kind of like Aaron Rodgers. They stay they're staying too long and they're damaging their legacy. Exactly. So, but I want to touch on this real quick before we move on to the Chargers, Mohammed. I want to get your take on this because the guy I watched the other day that was talking about Mahomes and Kelsey being washed. I don't want to go too far here. I don't want to say Mahomes is washed, but he broke down all the stats from Mahomes' career so far in the 7 years he's been in the league. And every year his numbers have dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. He said pretty much from 2018, from the first year Mahomes was started until 2022, Mahomes was, his completion percentage, his passer rating, his touchdown interception ratio, his yards, everything was really, really good. Not really otherworldly, but really good, like top in the NFL every single year. These last 2 years, 23 and 24, he's declined drastically in his stats. And he also brought up Tom Brady, saying, yeah, Tom Brady wasn't, that great early in his career, even whenever he won the Super Bowls. But as he got older, he got smarter and wiser, and his, stats and everything started creeping up.
Yeah.
As time went on, Tom Brady got better. As time's going on, Patrick Mahomes has gotten worse. What are your thoughts?
I sort of agree with that, Eddie. I mean, I think definitely having Reed as a coach helping out, that helps him a lot. And the past couple of years, I think the defense has pretty much been carrying the team. You could see that. That's how they've been winning. Like last year too. It's not Patrick Mahomes. It's what's around him too. You start taking pieces away from him, and he's going to look average. Give him the same team that the Broncos had last year with a little bit of pretty much no talent. What do you think he's going to do? Nothing. So it's definitely going to show this coming season, Eddie, because we were just talking about their cap situation. They don't have money. They're going to have to let a lot of their players go. So it's going to show because it's going to be depending on your talent. And if you don't have talent around you, what are you going to do? So, yeah, I agree.
I agree. And also the fact that my thing is like I said, I don't know 100%. You believe Travis Kelce's going to retire this year. I think he should, but I'm not 100% what he's going to do yet. But Travis Kelce retires, like that. I wouldn't say that's going to be like world ending for the Chiefs because like this last year he really didn't play that well. He didn't, and Mahomes has turned into a check down artist, honestly. But with that, also the guy was talking about Andy Reid. Andy Reid's probably going to retire here in the next couple of years, like 2-3 years. He's like 3 years max is how many more years I see Andy Reid playing or coaching. If that's the case, to me, this whole Chiefs thing is done. Like, people want to talk about, Patrick Mahomes is, Patrick Mahomes at the offense. I'm sorry. I don't like the Chiefs, but I do respect Andy Reid. He's a hell of a coach. And to me, he's the reason why the Chiefs have been as good as they've been. Why they've had this little dynasty run. It's because of Andy Reid. He retired. Now, I'm not saying the Chiefs can't get a good head coach, but I guarantee you they're not going to get a head coach similar to what Andy Reid has accomplished. They're not going to get that level type of coach whenever he does retire. All the stuff, his play calling, his play design, everything, getting guys open, that is Andy Reid. That is not Patrick Mahomes. And once he's gone, this Chiefs team, I 100% believe it with every bone in my body. This Chiefs team and Patrick Mahomes are going to take a real big step back. Now, that could be maybe stopped a little bit depending on what coach they hire. If he's good enough to come in and, be that kind of a good offensive play caller and, play designer, that might mitigate it a little. But there's going to be a huge, drop off once Andy Reid retires, in my opinion. So just something to look forward to, Broncos country. I think Andy Reid probably will retire this next year or two. Like, he talked about coming back next year, but I watched that interview. He doesn't seem too sure after next year if he's going to come back or not. So take that with what you will. But moving on to the next team, the Los Angeles Chargers. Another team I think has a decent amount of cap space this year, but they got a lot of free agents. They got Mack. There's been talks about them getting rid of Bosa. They got to get receivers. They got to get more. They got to get a running game, a tight end. I'm certain Jim Harbaugh is going to probably want to boost up that offensive line some more and their defense as a whole. The Chargers, I think, are going to be better in 2025, honestly, just like the Broncos. They're going to build their roster. They got the cap space to bring guys in. I think guys are going to want to come to play for Jim Harbaugh just like they would with Sean Payton. So I believe the Chargers are going to be a solid team next year. But what are your thoughts, Mohammed?
Yeah, Eddie. It's the same thing as the Broncos. It's pretty similar, like as far as needs, as far as like a wide receiver, tight end, and he loves to run the ball. Maybe a running back. That O line is really critical in his system. So I think he's probably going to try to add some more. Maybe in the first round they can go O line like they did last draft as well. And the defense, depending on what they do in free agency, they're probably going to have to cut some players. So yeah, have to go in defense. So it's pretty similar. And I think they have a little bit more money as far as the cap than the Broncos too. So
I think they got like 50 million in cap, if I remember right. If they cut Bosa or trade him, I think they save another couple million, like maybe 10. So they might be up to 60 million. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But yeah, they got a lot of needs. And I do believe the Chargers and Broncos are both going to be, uh, competing for this division next year. If I had to guess, I didn't touch on this before I moved on, but Kansas City, like I think Broncos probably win 12 games this year. I think Kansas City takes a step back. They probably win about maybe 11 or 10 this year, depending on who they bring back, who they can resign, whether if Kelsey retires. The Chargers, I think they're right in that same range, about maybe 11, 12 wins. I think this division next year is going to be a lot closer than people think. But I still think it's like, if I had to guess right now, Broncos 12 wins, Chiefs 10 wins, Chargers probably about 12 wins. And it's going to come down to who, has more wins in the division, of course, between the Broncos and Chargers. Maybe, at the end of the season, maybe the Chiefs can win one more game and go 11-6, while the Broncos and Chargers go 12-5. But that's my prediction for those teams. They desperately got to get deep, especially if they let Bosa go. I mean, he's older. I think he's like 34. So is Mac. He's like 34. But Mac had a great year last year. Bosa, we didn't hear a lot from. He was injured. So they're going to have to upgrade their defensive line. Their inside linebacker, I think their linebackers are pretty solid. Their secondary is okay. They might want to upgrade someone there. But yeah, I think Jim Harbaugh probably wants to boost that offensive line more. He's got to get a tight end one. He's got to get an RB. He's got to get a wide receiver. I think honestly the Chargers have more needs than the Broncos, but also at the same time, they have more cap space than the Broncos by like 10, 20 million. So that's my take on the Chargers. Last team, the Las Vegas Raiders. This team, to me, like they're 2, maybe 3 years away from even being contenders for the playoffs. And I say that because it just depends on what they do this offseason. Like Max Crosby I've been watching videos. Max Crosby wants out of Las Vegas. He doesn't want to be there anymore. If he goes, the only player they have on that roster that's worth a damn that anybody's going to know the name of is Brock Bowers, which is a good piece to have on offense at tight end. I'm not going to argue that. But this team's got so many defensive line, linebacker, safety, corner, offensive line, running back, wide receiver, quarterback. The biggest one. Like the only position I honestly don't think they need is tight end. And Pete Carroll, like we talked about this last week, he's only there for 3 years. The guy's 74. He's going to come in. He's probably going to bring some good people in. But in the draft, I'm saying in the draft, next 3 drafts, Pete Carroll will bring in some solid players. I think he'll draft really well. But who in the hell in free agency is going to go into free agency, look at the Raiders, like, yeah, they got the quarterback. like no one's going to want to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, yeah, of course they will. If the Raiders want to overpay, like they're going to have, if they want big names, they're going to have to overpay. And, and I'm talking about big names like a Mac or a Bosa, guys that are like kind of past their prime, you're going to have to pay them big. I mean, I'm not saying you can't get like a young guy still in his 20s. That's a big name player, but you're really going to have to overpay. Like an older player, like 30 or plus, that's, a big name in the NFL, you're going to have to overpay for, but you're not going to overpay as much because he's older. Like they're not going to be like, hey, Mac, we're going to give you $30 million a year. They're not going to do that. Now, if it was like Smith, the offensive guard for the Chiefs, if he winds up walking, the guy's only 26. He's still got 4 really good years left in his prime. You're probably going to have to pay that cat like $25 to $30 million a year for him to come to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Mohammed?
Yeah, I mean, they need everything. They need every position they need. I mean, and the main one is the quarterback. That's the biggest question. What are you going to do in quarterback? You're going to go get a free agent. I think the smartest thing to do for the Raiders, Eddie, is to just get a quarterback and just start building the team. You're not going to get a quarterback in this draft unless you move up and sell the farm. I think they should just start building the team, not worry too much about the quarterback this season. And next season on the draft, I'm pretty sure they're not going to win a lot of games. Then go look for your quarterback maybe next season. But I don't know what they're going to do, Eddie. Who are they going to bring
I
in?
wouldn't go that far.
Aaron Rodgers?
No, I'm saying like I agree with you, and this is probably what they're going to do: go to free agency. Whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson reunites with Pete Carroll, or Sam Darnold, even. I could see them going after one of these quarterbacks. But here's the thing I disagree with you, Mohammed, is that they're probably going to, even if they keep Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew or whoever it is, Pete Carroll is the head coach. He's going to win them, I guarantee you, 5 to 6 games next year, maybe even 7, maybe. The problem with that the Raiders are going to have that they're going to run into these next couple of years with Pete Carroll there, because Pete Carroll is not going to purposely tank. Even if he knows that he's only going to be there for 3 years and he's there to change the culture, build the roster up, he's not going to sit there and want to lose these 3 years. He's going to compete. That's just Pete Carroll. That's just the kind of person he is. Unless there's another draft class like 2024's QB draft class, the Raiders are never going to be able to draft a quarterback because they're not going to be good enough to make the playoffs in these 3 years, and they're not going to be bad enough to get a top pick to get a quarterback. Like this year's quarterback class, there's 2 first-round pick quarterbacks. 2. Granted, yes, Pete Carroll, whenever he drafted Russell Wilson, I think Russell Wilson was a 3rd-round pick, but with Pete Carroll, it also depends on who your offensive coordinator is. And, maybe they could go after someone like Cam Ward, 1st-round pick, Shedeur, 1st-round pick. I'm trying to think. Who's some other quarterbacks in this draft class? I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe they grab one in the 2nd or 3rd round. And maybe hopefully he develops into the guy. But as far as them being able to take a quarterback, a high prospect quarterback in the draft, it's not going to happen. I guarantee you 25, 26, and 27, as long as Pete Carroll's there, they'll win at least 5 to 6 games. And that's going to put them probably, 10, 11, right in that area. And unless there's a quarterback draft class like 2024's where 6 quarterbacks went in the 1st round, like Caleb Williams, people say, oh, he was the 1st-round pick. He was kind of a bust this year. Yeah, well, he didn't really have the right coaching staff. We'll have to wait and see how this year goes with Ben Johnson. Like if Caleb Williams shines this year with Ben Johnson, then you say, okay, there's a quarterback that, is a franchise guy. Who was the second? Jaden Daniels, franchise guy. Drake May, all the hearings I hear from Patriots fans, and national media is he's a franchise guy. He just needs the right coach. And now with Mike Vrabel there, Drake May's going to be the franchise guy. Michael Penix, didn't really get to see a whole lot of him this year, but when we did see him, he actually played really, really well. He looked like a franchise guy. I'm not saying he is, but he did look like one. We just have to see what he does in 2025. JJ, we're not sure. He didn't get a chance to play last year because he was injured all year. But after seeing what Kevin O'Connell did with Sam Darnold, the guy that passed around the NFL, the number 2 overall pick in the draft, and what he was able to do with him, I wouldn't be hesitant to say that JJ could be a franchise guy. And, of course, we know what Bo Nix has done. We know. 3,700 yards, 29 TDs, most passing touchdowns by a rookie QB all season. Like, unless you have no draft class like that and the Raiders are picking around 10, like, they're not going to get their franchise guy in the draft unless they hit on something in the later rounds. And it's already hard enough to find a franchise guy in the 1st round, let alone in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. So, to me, the Raiders, like, I do believe Pete Carroll will bring in solid players through the draft, maybe free agency towards the end of his tenure once the team starts looking good. But I don't see them winning more. I don't see them going above 500 for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I really don't. And, he might change the culture. He might bring in some studs, and then maybe he hands it off to his offensive coordinator that he picks as the next head coach. But with that guy, who knows? He could be a horrible head coach like a Nathaniel Hackett. He could be way in over his head, and, maybe he changes the culture again and changes the scheme, and maybe the offense doesn't really work or the defense doesn't really work. He brings in a defensive coordinator different. Well, he will, because Pete Carroll's going to be the DC. The defense is going to be run differently. So it's going to be a few years for the Raiders. Like a couple years ago, I would agree that the Broncos were in a worse situation than any team in the NFL. Now I think the Raiders are. They literally hired a 74-year-old head coach. They have no position outside of tight end solidified on the roster. At least with the Broncos, yeah, we had the dead cap, but you had a good wide receiver in Courtland Sutton. You had a couple of good pieces on the offensive line. You had a top defense in the NFL. The Raiders have a top nothing in the NFL, offense or defense, besides tight end. So, to me, I think the Raiders this year are probably going to win about 6 games. I think they go 6-11. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't see them winning more than that. But see, the problem, Eddie, is even if they said, you know what, we're going to sell the farm, we're going to trade in 3 first-round picks, we're going to move all the way up to like 3 or 2 or 1, whatever, to get a quarterback. There's no guarantee that this quarterback is going to be the franchise guy. That's the problem.
And if that's the case, if he doesn't turn out to be the franchise guy, you literally just sold the farm for nothing. Now you really are going to have to rebuild again. It's going to take you another couple of years.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's really hard, Eddie. That's why I am so happy that we're not even talking about the quarterback anymore. Those miserable years that we had to endure.
Yeah, it's not good for the Raiders. Like I said, even if they find their franchise guy, say they hire the right OC, they get Sam Darnold, and he's average next year. He's not as good as he was in Minnesota, but say he's just average. Like, you're still a couple years away from winning anything. You still got to build the rest of this roster. Like I said, outside, even if you bring Sam Darnold in, which I guarantee you, if Sam Darnold says, yeah, I'll come to Las Vegas, they're going to have to drastically overpay him. They're going to. Sam Darnold's like, why the hell would I go to Vegas with a defensive-minded head coach, no talent on that roster outside of Brock Bowers, when he's like, let's see, I could go to, I'm just throwing the name, he could re-sign with the Vikings. He could go to, I'm trying to think on top of my head, maybe he goes to even the Jets, who I think have a better roster than the Raiders do. What about maybe, I'm just trying to think of teams on top of my head. What about Pittsburgh? Like, Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. They have a better roster.
Yeah.
And, I would, maybe Mike Tomlin could be a better head coach. I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, what if he wanted to go to one of those teams? You know what I mean? Like, what if he's like, hey, I want to go back to San Francisco. They decide not to pay Purdy. What if he wants to go to Los Angeles with Sean McVay? Because, there's been rumors about the Rams trading away Matthew Stafford. So what if he wants to go to, Los Angeles? Like, all those teams are better than the Las Vegas Raiders. Coach-wise, in my opinion, and roster-wise especially. Just a food for thought. If they want Sam Darnold, they're going to have to overpay him. Rodgers, he went to a disaster organization in the Jets a couple years ago, but they still had a good roster. And granted, they're getting rid of him, but why on earth would he want to go to the Las Vegas Raiders, a team with no talent and a defensive-minded head coach again? Answer me that. He's not going to. So, like, it's going to be rough for the Raiders the next couple of years, man. I really believe that. It's going to be, like I said, at least 2-3 years minimum for them to build this roster. And like I said, the next 2-3 years, they're going to win enough games to where they're not going to be able to get a top-flight quarterback unless they trade the farm to move up.
Mm-hmm.
Especially this year. And say the Raiders do. They trade 3 first-round picks, Max Crosby, to move up to 1 or to 2 and get Shedeur or Cam Ward. What do you think is going to happen? Like you said yourself, what if one of those guys are a bust? Like, I don't think Shedeur will. I think he'll cope well to the NFL, maybe Cam Ward too, but we could be wrong. I mean, look at Trevor Lawrence. He's not really playing well, and he was the first pick in the draft.
Yep.
Caleb Williams, like I said, maybe he proves wrong this year with Ben Johnson, but he's the number 1 overall pick. He looked like a bust this year. And I guarantee, I'll bet you money on this, Mohammed. If they do wind up trading up and getting Shedeur or Cam Ward at number 1 overall pick, and he's bad next year, Raider fans are going to lose it. They will completely snap because it's like, we just traded the farm for this kid, hoping he's going to be the future, and now he looks like garbage, and now we have no picks or nothing to, draft our future. Like, man, I'm going to say this. It's going to be fun watching the Raiders this offseason. It really will be fun.
But Eddie, even if they sell the farm and they get Shedeur or they get Cam Ward, and then the next 2-3 seasons, you don't have a first-round pick, so you're going to have to pick second. How are you going to build this roster unless you go to free agency, overpay?
That's what I'm saying. That's 100% what I'm saying. Like even if Cam Ward or Shedeur, they move up, draft one of those guys, and they wind up being bad next year, I wouldn't freak out about it. I'd be like, to me, it's like, even though Bo Nix, he's a more older rookie he was this year, and he had that knowledge, but it's like, you still got to give it 2 or 3 years, man. A quarterback that's 22, 21, 20, maybe even 23, you got to give it at least at the minimum 2, if not 3 years for them to get into the system, develop. But that's the other thing too. Like, you hire Pete Carroll to bring in your roster, and if you draft one of these quarterbacks or even a quarterback next year, and you bring in an OC, and then in 2 years, a new coaching staff comes in, this kid's going to have to learn a whole new system again in a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's going to stunt the growth of that young guy. So, honestly, I think the Raiders are stupid. I think their owner is an idiot.
I agree.
He should have went, even I know they were trying to go after Ben Johnson. I really do. I understand they were trying to go after Ben Johnson, but they should have went after an OC for head coach. Even if it would have been a bad decision, maybe not as bad as Nathaniel Hackett, but it was kind of going down there the first year, I would still hang on to him. Let him draft his guy and let him build. That was a problem with, that's a thing I've been hearing about the Jets, is that don't fire Anthony Glenn in this first year, even if it looks bad. Give him time to build this roster and get better. And that's what the Raiders should have done. They should have went out and got one of these young offensive-minded head coaches, these young offensive coordinators. Brought him in, give him 3 to 4 years to build this roster, get his guy, and develop him. Yeah, you're going to be bad regardless the next couple of years. You might as well got to, at least had something to look forward to. Seriously, if you were a Raiders fan, I'm sorry, I know you don't like that, Mohammed, but say you're a Raiders fan right now. What is the one thing you're looking forward to with Pete Carroll and no quarterback? What does the future look like for you? And what do you think? Oh my God, at least we got a quarterback or a head coach that's going to build this team, or get a quarterback we have to look forward to. Do you have anything to look forward to as a Raiders fan?
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't look like a future for me. You're getting this old coach, all respect to him, but how long is he going to coach for?
Yeah. And at the same time, like I said, when we hired Sean Payton, even for the people that are oh, Russell Wilson's washed after the 2022 season, you knew Sean Payton was going to get it right. You knew he was going to build this roster, and if he had to move on from Russ, get his quarterback, you knew you had at least some hope and promise. Whenever you're a bad team, say a couple years ago, the Chicago Bears with, Matt Eberflus as your head coach, you had the number 1 overall pick. You're like, you know what? I got a high draft pick. I got the first pick in the draft. I can go into the draft and get the quarterback of the future and have something to look forward to. These teams that are bad in bad situations, they either have a head coach that they know is going to turn things around, or at least a promising young head coach, like us a couple of years ago with Nathaniel Hackett. Granted, we didn't realize it was going to turn out as bad as it did, but when we hired Nathaniel Hackett, no one thought that was going to happen. Bronco fans were finally excited. Oh, finally, cool. We got a young, offensive-minded head coach. We got something to look forward to.
And we got Russell Wilson.
Holy crap. What? We got Russell Wilson and a young offensive mind. These guys are going to cook together. Yeah. Once again, we didn't realize how it was going to turn out and what happened. Looking back on it, it's terrible now. It was, bad. But I'm saying, at least at that time, you had, at least some excitement, at least some kind of, hope and optimism. As a Raiders fan right now, you got a 74-year-old head coach. You have, for the future, you have no idea who your quarterback's going to be, probably for the next, 3 years. You have no hope as a Raiders fan.
But, Eddie, supposedly Tom Brady has a big influence, a big say on whatever goes on with the Raiders. What do you think the thinking is here to hire this coach? What do you think Tom Brady's thinking as far as a quarterback? I'm sure you heard about that, right?
Yeah, I did. Maybe they could bring in like I said, a Sam Darnold, and maybe be somewhat competitive. But again, it's like, what do you do? I'm sure there's a way, regardless if it's get Sam Darnold, try to be competitive, but you're not getting as high as draft pick, or just stay with Aiden O'Connell and just tank next year. Like that's the only way I can honestly see for this team next year. You got the 6th overall pick. Maybe they go into the draft, they trade that back, they stockpile more draft capital this offseason, and they build their roster through the draft this year. Maybe bring in a couple old aging vets that are like, I know I'm not going to win a Super Bowl. Just give me a couple million. I'll come here and play for you. Whatever. And then next year, 2025, maybe it's, Tom Brady's like, we need the freaking tank. We just need to completely freaking I know tanking's illegal, but it's like, we just need to play, don't sign any great players. Sign some aging vets that can come in, maybe help out a little bit, mentor the young guys. Don't worry about drafting a quarterback this year, and, just like I said, like people said, change the culture, bring in some talent, and then just next year, just suck. Just completely fucking fall off the map. Go 1-16 next year, or go 0-17. Just be an absolute dog shit of a team. Get that high draft pick. And I don't know, is it 2026 or 2027? Arch Manning comes out.
That's what I was thinking. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they don't draft him.
Well, I'm saying as a Raiders fan, hope for that. Hope you draft Arch Manning. And then, like I said earlier, Pete Carroll coaches another couple of years. He's got his OC that can develop Arch. And then whenever Pete Carroll steps away to retire, then boom, the offensive coordinator can jump up, be the next head coach, and him and Arch Manning or any quarterback, any young quarterback that they decide to take, have that chemistry together, and then you can build on that. But once again, that's going to be another 5 years. Mm-hmm. Even if they draft a quarterback next year in 2026, it might take him a few years to get good. And that's only if they do hire the OC and head coach after Pete Carroll retires and they promote him. It's like, who's to say that guy's going to be a good head coach?
No guarantees.
Exactly. So there's really, that's the only way I can see maybe the Raiders going about it. But once again, they're still at least at the minimum 3 years away from competing for even the playoffs. So, and by that time, you're going to have Bo Nix pretty much in his prime, Justin Herbert in his prime. You're going to have Patrick Mahomes probably about 33, but still probably playing relatively well. Maybe the Chiefs take a step back as Andy Reid retires by that point. But you're going to have Bo Nix and Sean Payton in the division, Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert in the division. You're going to have 2 teams. The Chiefs are probably still going to be relatively good. Maybe not great like they have been, but they're still going to be good. And here's you as the Raiders with a rookie quarterback coming in with a head coach that may or may not be good and be like, we're still going to finish last in the division. So for Raider fans, they have nothing to look forward to, man. I hate the Raiders as much as you do. I hate the Chiefs more, though. But I kind of feel sorry for them because I know what it's like to be in that position as a Broncos fan over the last couple of years. Maybe not as bad, but I know what it's like to have, an old head coach that's stuck in his ways, Vic Fangio, and no quarterback.
Yeah, so the life of suck, That's what it is, And that's
the Raiders the next 5 years. So Just be happy with that, Mohammed. You know, at least the Raiders are going to suck for the next 3 years.
Going to be very, very happy. They can just continue to suck. And
As is all of Broncos country. Because, like I said, I know a lot of Broncos fans hate the Raiders more than they hate the Chiefs. It's just for me, the Chiefs, I hate them more because I'm from Missouri and I hate the Chiefs. But the majority of Bronco fans, like I've talked to people that have lived out in Denver their entire lives, been Bronco fans their entire lives. Who do you hate more, the Chiefs or the Raiders? Raiders, like 90% of the time. Raiders. So, but just take solace in that, guys. But we're pretty much at an hour, Mohammed. But you got any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
I just want to say, Eddie, that this next few years are really critical for the Broncos. While Bo Nix still is in his rookie, contract before we have to pay him, so we have to make a push for the Super Bowl. I'm not saying this year. I'm just saying the next 2-3 years we have to build this team, build the roster, and hopefully we can go to the Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I do believe the Broncos will win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
I do believe that. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be rough, especially in this division. But I think within the next, probably by, 2025, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. By 2029, the Broncos will have a Super Bowl ring. I will put that out there into the universe, and I strongly believe they will have a Super Bowl by 2029.
But flag too, Eddie. We're gonna have to add it somewhere, right?
I gotta find it first. I'll probably have to get it online. Anyway, that's it for us tonight, guys. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please hit the bell notification to know when we go live. And Mohammed, it was great talking to you tonight, man.
Thank you, Eddie. Likewise.
All right, guys. We will see you next week. Peace.
Peace.